The story of global power is often written in boardrooms, behind closed doors, or in television studios where sharp words can shift alliances. Today, the focus is on India, the United States, and the sharp turn their relationship has taken. The world is watching closely because what unfolds here could reshape the future of trade, diplomacy, and security in Asia and far beyond. It began with a sudden announcement from Washington. The United States would double tariffs on Indian goods to a stunning 50%, effective August 27th. For India, one of the fastest-growing economies on the planet and a nation deeply invested in its global partnerships, the shock was profound. But underneath the headlines, the decision exposed cracks in trust, raised doubts about long-term partnerships, and forced New Delhi to recalibrate its foreign policy with remarkable speed. This was not just about tariffs. It was about India's strategic autonomy, its balancing act between Moscow, Washington, and Beijing, and the ripple effects that such a decision could cause across Europe and the wider world. When Patrick Hilgel, a senior analyst at the Polish Institute of International Affairs and a respected expert on South Asia, was asked about the move, his words carried the weight of history. He reminded us that Donald Trump had always considered India the tariffs king. During Trump's first presidency, he grew impatient with what he saw as unfair trade practices. The U.S. trade deficit with India had only widened, growing by $15 billion over 8 years instead of shrinking. To Trump, this was unacceptable. By doubling tariffs, he was signaling both his frustration and his intent to pressure India into opening its markets more fully to American goods. But trade friction tells only part of the story. Trump's team often invokes Russia when speaking about India, pointing to New Delhi's refusal to condemn Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In reality, as Hilgel explained, Russia is a convenient excuse, an extra lever of pressure rather than the true cause. Trump's move was a cold calculation rooted in economics, but packaged in the familiar rhetoric of geopolitics. The real danger, Hilgel warned, was that Trump's approach could undo decades of trust-building between Washington and New Delhi. For nearly 25 years, successive American administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, had invested in strengthening ties with India. They worked together on defense agreements, energy partnerships, technology transfers, and most importantly, on building a foundation of trust. During Trump's first term, India was one of the few nations genuinely enthusiastic about his presidency. Alongside Poland and Israel, India embraced Washington as a reliable partner. Now that trust was being dismantled piece by piece, and for Indian policymakers, it felt like betrayal. For Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the timing could not have been more telling. Back in 2022, when much of the world condemned Russia, Modi chose silence, refusing to denounce Vladimir Putin outright. At the time, many critics accused India of hedging its bets. Today, Modi could point to Trump's tariff strike as proof that strategic autonomy was the right choice. If Washington could turn hostile so quickly, how wise would it be for India to sever ties with Russia? There was also another layer, one far more personal. Donald Trump has long coveted a Nobel Peace Prize, and earlier this year he claimed credit for diffusing tensions between India and Pakistan after cross-border hostilities. Pakistan, ever eager to court favor, publicly praised Trump's role. India, by contrast, rejected his narrative, insisting it had managed the crisis on its own terms. For a leader like Trump who thrives on public recognition, India's refusal to grant him credit may have stung deeply. Hilgel suggested that this personal slight could be feeding into the broader tariff escalation. Whatever the motivations, the consequences were clear. India now had stronger reasons than ever to diversify its partnerships. The question was whether this meant leaning more on Russia, moving closer to China, or finding fresh ground with Europe. The prospect of India pivoting toward China may seem startling, especially given the violent clashes along their Himalayan border in 2020, where 20 Indian soldiers lost their lives. That incident froze relations and fueled nationalist anger. Yet, as Hilgel explained, India cannot afford perpetual hostility with Beijing. For an economy aspiring to sustain rapid growth and for a nation seeking security in a volatile region, normalization with China is not a choice, it is a necessity. In the past year, India quietly resumed dialogue with Beijing, signaling its intent to manage tensions pragmatically. This does not mean India is realigning with China, but rather that it seeks to keep every option open, consistent with its long-standing principle of strategic autonomy. Here lies the heart of India's foreign policy doctrine. Never put all your eggs in one basket. By balancing ties with Russia, keeping channels open with China, engaging with Europe, and managing relations with America, India ensures flexibility. Trump's tariff hike does not push India fully away from the West, but it does halt what was once a steady drift toward closer alignment. For 20 years, Washington and Brussels had poured energy into pulling India closer. In one stroke, Trump slowed that momentum, perhaps even reversed it. And this is where Europe steps onto the stage. Unlike the United States, Europe has positioned itself as a steady partner for India, one that respects multilateralism, rule-based order, and the shared need for security. This year, the entire European Commission traveled to New Delhi, underscoring how seriously Europe takes the relationship. Negotiations for a free trade deal between India and the European Union are close to conclusion, with a major summit planned for early next year. A new 5-year strategic partnership is on the table. For Europe, this is more than diplomacy. It is an opportunity to fill the space left by America's sudden retreat. Still, complications remain. India has become one of the largest importers of Russian oil, buying it at discounted rates and refining it for resale. In fact, Europe itself has been buying Russian oil processed in Indian refineries, effectively allowing Russian energy to reach European markets through a back door. Critics argue this undermines sanctions against Moscow. But as Hilgel clarified, India has not violated any international laws. It has acted in accordance with global trade rules, driven by the simple need to secure affordable energy for its massive population. Yet change is coming. Under Europe's 18th package of sanctions, effective early next year, the EU will no longer purchase refined Russian oil from India. That decision reflects Europe's attempt to close loopholes, while also testing how far India is willing to go in balancing its ties. This delicate dance shows the complexity of modern geopolitics. India is not defying the West outright, but neither is it willing to cut off Moscow. Washington's tariff strike may push India further into this middle ground, closer to its BRICS partners, while keeping pragmatic ties with Europe intact. The key, as Hilgel stressed, is that India values autonomy above all. It will never allow itself to become dependent on any one power. For the United States, the risk is clear. By treating India as merely a pawn in a larger geopolitical game, Washington risks losing one of its most important partners in Asia. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. The irony is that during Trump's first term, India had been one of the most pro-American countries in the world. Today, thanks to the doubling of tariffs, that goodwill is evaporating. For Europe, the moment is ripe. The door is open to deepen economic ties, strengthen strategic cooperation, and build trust where America has allowed cracks to form. For Russia, the tariffs serve as a reminder that India remains a reliable partner, one that did not bow to Western pressure in 2022, and one that may lean even more heavily on Moscow now. For China, the tariffs offer a narrow window to thaw relations with New Delhi, even if rivalry remains the dominant theme. And for India, the lesson is sharp and unforgettable. Great powers act in their own interests, often abruptly and without warning. Tariffs today, praise tomorrow, sanctions the next day. The winds of global politics shift quickly. What remains constant is India's determination to chart its own course. Strategic autonomy is not just a phrase for Indian diplomacy, it is a shield against uncertainty. As August 27th approaches and tariffs climb to 50%, the world will watch how India responds. Will it retaliate against Washington? Will it double down on ties with Russia? Will it accelerate its free trade talks with Europe? Or will it quietly mend fences with China, buying itself the space it needs to grow? The answers to these questions will not only decide the future of India's economy, but will shape the balance of power in the 21st century. For now, one thing is certain. The trust between Washington and New Delhi has been shaken, and the ripple effects are just beginning.